Let's review some vocabulary before we get started. First of all, I want to talk about perimeter. Perimeter is measured with like a ruler. It's a length measurement. We use centimeters. Here's our centimeters. We have inches. We have a foot. That's the whole ruler. We talked about yards and miles. We use these types of measurements to measure perimeter. Perimeter is a one-dimensional unit because we're only using length to measure around. Then we talked about area. On area, I also have my perimeter here in white. You can see that the white is encasing it, and inside I have all of my Legos. Area is a unit that has 2 dimensions. It uses square units. See our square units? And it uses measurements like squared centimeters, squared inches, squared feet. That's because I am measuring my length and my width. I have 2 parts, not just the length like the ruler. I have length and width. And so I multiply those 2 to find out how many I have in between. Or I could count all of these. And you notice they're all tight. My Legos are all tight together. There's no gaps in between them. They're not overlapping each other. That is how area works. Same thing with perimeter. There's no gaps in between our inches. They're all right next to each other and they don't overlap. So here's our one-dimensional. Here is our two-dimensional. Well, today we're going to talk about volume, and we're going to use a rectangular prism. A prism has all sides everywhere, except this one. Look, this one's missing one of the sides because we want to fill it up. A prism is a solid figure, which would be solid if we had our other side. And it is talking about, we have our length and our width, but we also have our volume about what's inside. How much is going to fill that up? So I have a tool to fill it up. I have some pom-poms right here. I'm going to use the pom-poms to fill it up. Now, just like my inches, just like my area with my Legos, I've got to fill it all up. I can't have any spaces left over, so I'm going to squish in my pom-poms. I want them to fill it up nice and good. Oh, I pushed too many in. They started falling out on me. Okay, what do you think? Can you see missing areas? Yeah, I think I can see some missing areas too. And you know what? These 2 pom-poms, they're not the same size. This one on top's a little bit bigger than this little one. I don't think pom-poms are a very good way to measure the units in my prism. So I'm going to get rid of those. I'm going to take those out. I went to school and I picked up a tool that you're going to recognize to help us figure out how we can figure out the volume of our prism. I went to school and I picked up our little cubes. Our cubes have faces. Did you know that? Each side, see, each side as I turn it, and I turn it this way, and I turn it this way, all of those are the faces. How many faces do you think our cube has? Guess what? I used my washable marker and I wrote numbers on our cube. So we have 1, there's 4, let's go the other way. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, then I have 5, 6 faces for my cube. Okay, so we've covered what the faces are. Now, my cube also has edges. Do you see the edges? How many edges do you think our cube has? I'm going to count them. You try and follow along. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Then I have on the top, I have 5, 6, 7, 8. On the bottom, I have 9, 10, 11, 12. So these are called my edges. I have 12 edges and I have 6 faces on my cube. Now, where my edges come together to form a little point, those are called a vertex. Can you see that vertex right there? That's where all these 3 are coming together. That is called a vertex. All right, true or false? All of the edges on my cube are the same length. True, they are all the same length. If they were not the same length, my square would not be perfectly square. All right, next one. All the faces on my cube are the same size square. True or false? I'll move it around. I'm getting marker all over. We're going to wipe that off. You said true. You are correct. All of my faces are the same size square. All right, so now I know that I have this unit that's much more reliable than my pom-pom. So I am going to start putting, oh, there you can see it. I'm going to start putting my square units, or I'm sorry, not square units, that would be in my area, my cube units into my prism. I'm going to start filling those all up. All right, so I have, you can see I have my very first row of my cubes in there. Let me see, can you count those? Can you see the lines? They're packed nice and tight. There's no gaps. There's no overlapping. Kind of hard to have no absolute gaps when it's paper. Count how many I have in there. How many do you count? If you counted 10, then you are right. Okay, but my volume isn't just 10 cubes. I still have another row to do. So I need to finish putting in my cubes into my prism. All right, I have my cubes all filled into my prism. How many cubes do you see on this, in this section right here? Let me turn this, get it close. How many do you see? If you counted 10, you are correct. So how many total cubes do I have inside my prism, my rectangular prism? How many do I have? Think about it. I had 10 underneath and I have 10 on top. I have 20 cubes inside my prism. So ideally, we would be in class, everybody would have their own prisms that they could cut out, and everybody would have our cubes to make. But we're all at home right now, so that doesn't work. So instead of doing this, you could practice with some Legos. I have Legos right here in my area. I'm going to pull some of those off. They're stuck, just a minute. Okay, so if I wanted to play around with a little volume, I could use some Legos just like I have here. And they're not stuck together because I wanted to be able to show and talk about them. But you can see that we have our length, we have our width, but we also have our volume. We have 1 row, 2 rows, 3 rows we'd have to figure out. And we would count up all of our things, all of our Legos to find out how many cubes we had. So if we counted these together to fill up our pretend prism, we're going to pretend our prism is around here and this is what's inside, we would count them. So on this bottom row, I have 1, 2, 3, then I have 4, 5, 6, and then I have 7, 8, 9. So my cube, my volume would be 9 cubic Legos. That would be my measurement. I have 9 cubic Legos because I counted all of those rows and all of the columns. You get to try now in a Nearpod. It's going to go over a little bit what we've done. So if you haven't quite gotten it all, that's good because it's going to cover it again. It'll say like you're going to do this as a class. Obviously, we can't do it as a class. So just do your best with answering the questions. And all you're doing is counting cubes. That's what our Nearpod is. That's what we're starting with. So good luck. And I can't wait to see what you do in our Nearpod.